it's much easier to look outside of yourself and to blame or to judge or to criticize rather than look inward and say, what part am I playing in this pattern and how am I showing up and what kind of thoughts, emotions, energy am I bringing to this situation and setting?
Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. It's an understatement to say that it's frustrating being in a marriage where sex is non-existent or very infrequent. According to Justin Lee Miller, PhD, who's a sex researcher, about 1 in 7 Americans are in relationships with little to no sex. I believe good sex is healthy for a thriving, growing marriage relationship. Sex is bonding, contributes to your overall health, and not to mention really fun and exciting. I'm on a mission to eliminate poverty in bedrooms everywhere. I want to help couples overcome their challenges that inhibit them from fully receiving all the goodness that an intimate marriage can provide. Let's stop living beneath our privileges and courageously step into a strong, growing, thriving marriage. There are probably as many reasons as there are couples for why they've developed a pattern of intimacy avoidance, and it's really hard to make generalizations in this area. But today, you're invited to be a fly on the wall as my good friend Amy Langford and I discuss an email from John, which is not his real name. John emailed me recently asking for help in his marriage. He has a marriage where intimacy is not very frequent. And just for clarification, he's not mine or Amy's coaching client, but we wanted to approach this email and how I would approach it in a coaching setting. Amy Langford, my co-host today, has been a guest on my podcast before. See episode number 101. She's a very talented marriage and intimacy coach, and she coaches with me in my Next Level program. So you'll get a sense for her style today. For those of you that are not very familiar with marriage coaching, a marriage coach is a lot like a marriage therapist. In fact, there's a great deal of overlap. We receive much of the same training. The main difference is that you go to a therapist when you want to heal, but go to a coach when you want to win. I'm grateful for John to email me all this detail, and I can sense his sincere desire for change in his relationship. Remember that intimate marriages are a system. We always co-create the marriage dynamic we have. As they say, there are always two sides to every story, and unfortunately, we don't have his wife's perspective, so we'll be focusing today on what John can do. Perhaps in a future episode, we'll be able to focus on what his wife Julie can do. I sincerely appreciate your reviews on Apple Podcasts, by the way. Here's a recent review we received. I discovered this podcast when I had the realization that I have been limiting myself sexually. This podcast helped me recognize my limiting beliefs and start changing. I have never felt more fulfilled in my marriage than I do now, and I can't wait to keep learning and improving. The podcast with Dr. Mansfield was especially life-changing for me. You've got a listener for life. Thank you so much for that review. If you'll please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, just like this wonderful woman did, and you hear your review read in a future podcast episode here, please email support@getyourmarriageon.com and I'll email you a gift. Your reviews help strengthen marriages everywhere. I also have a new program coming out at the end of March that's perfect for couples that want a stronger, intimate marriage. Watch out for announcements about this as we get closer. And now for Amy Langford and I to coach John in his marriage. Amy, welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm so happy to do this with you. How are you today?
Oh, I'm so fabulous. Excited to be here and to collaborate with you. It's one of my favorite things.
Great. And Amy, you are an absolutely fantastic marriage and intimacy coach. You coach with me in my Next Level program, and everyone that works with you, or should I say almost everyone that works with you, absolutely loves you because you're very insightful and you know how to get right to the heart of the matter. And that's a great talent that you have.
Wait, thank you. I'm kind of blushing over here.
Great. So I got this email from this gentleman. We're going to keep him anonymous. We're going to call him John and Julie. And they're in a situation that a lot of people call they have a dead bedroom. That's where they wish sex and intimacy was more alive in their relationship, but things are just kind of like, flatlined, dead, just not a lot of excitement in that area of their marriage. And it seems like, at least on the outside appearances, they have a happy friendship in other areas. It's just when it comes to sex and intimacy, things don't go well. And I think a lot of people listening to this podcast can relate and they want to know what they can do about it. So, Amy, I thought it'd be great if you and I, as marriage coaches, put on our marriage coaching hat and go through this email that John sent us line by line and kind of give him our thoughts so that we can help him and maybe anyone else listening to this that might be in a similar situation.
Sounds like great fun. Let's do it.
All right, very good. Okay, the very first line says, she would not be willing to add her 2 cents to this at all. I'm kind of alone in this effort here.
I kind of wonder if that's actually true. First of all, the idea that he's alone has created him in this victim narrative. This is all my work. It's all my job. It's all my responsibility. And I find a lot of high desire people feel as if that is their reality.
Mm,
That it's their burden to carry. This is my work and my responsibility. And often I find the wife is quite willing to add their 2 cents, but they have been, well, I should say lower desire, so which isn't always the wife. The lower desire has been communicated to in many ways that their desire is wrong or broken, and the higher desire is right. So the lower desire often has quite a bit to say. So I would question right off from the beginning some of his narrative around this is all my work and she's not willing at all.
yeah.
It has that sort of, I'm a victim or a martyr
Yeah.
feeling to it.
Yeah. Two things you said really stood out to me. I'm the victim here. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she won't even participate in this with me. Oh, I'm doing
I'm
this alone.
alone.
Yes. And
Mm-hmm.
that thinking, and I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It could happen. Like, the other person's absolutely completely checked out. I mean, that does happen. But most of the time, it's something they've created themselves, right? They
Mm-hmm.
almost
Mm-hmm.
prefer to be in the victim stance because they feel superior in the way, like, look,
Mm-hmm.
look at me, look how good I am. I'm doing all this work.
Yep.
And it feels good to be in that way. It's comfortable.
And a lot of times they're doing a lot of consumption,
Ah,
a lot of like, I'm doing podcasts, I'm doing all that, but they haven't ever actually looked at themselves. All of that consumption and work is directed towards their spouse, who, in their mind, in some way, is broken.
right, right. So they're trying to fix the problem in the other person for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As
Yeah.
will be evident here too. The second thing that stood out to me in what you just said is she probably has a lot of things to say. It's just he doesn't want to hear it because it's
Mm-hmm.
invalidating to him. So
Right.
he'll say, no, 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 you don't want to say here. Because what he's really saying is she
You
doesn't
don't
feel
agree
free to
with
spoke.
me.
Yeah, exactly. She doesn't feel free to
You don't
really.
have my opinion yet. You,
Exactly. And she
yes.
might shut up, but it's like, you don't want to hear my opinion. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you can't handle the truth. Kind
That's
of a
right. Right.
re- reference here.
Exactly.
All right.
The only opinion you want is the one that matches yours.
Yeah, he's not open to another opinion, which is
Mm-hmm.
really important if you want to build an intimate relationship.
Yeah.
Make room for two opinions there.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Then John gives us some really helpful background information. We'd been married for almost 20 years. We met while she served an LDS mission in my area. The relationship blossomed way after her return home. And we have 3 kids, 16, 10, and 7 years old. We both work. She has an office job, I'm in the trades, and have various other responsibilities outside our home. We love each other's company and have very frequent date nights. Now that we have a teenage built-in babysitter, and even some day
Woohoo.
dates if our work schedules permit. And I gotta say, that's a glorious phase of life when
Yes, it is.
your children are old
It is.
enough that you can leave without worrying
It's
what's
so
gonna
freeing. And it sounds like in their other areas of life, they do have a partnership. They're working together, they're collaborating. So,
Yeah.
yeah, sounds awesome. The date nights, they love each other's company. That's all amazing. A good friendship there.
Right. And then he says, all this being said, she has no sex drive, and no is in all caps. She has no
I
sex drive.
would absolutely question this.
Mhm.
the question would be, is it that she has no sex drive, or is her sex drive different than yours? Does
Okay.
it not present in the same way?
Hmm.
Um, and are you expecting it to present in the same way? Are you expecting that she will interact with her sexuality in the same way that he does? It seems such a black and white framing, like you either have it or you don't, that I often find that more black and white framing, that all or nothing thinking in that victim mindset or in something that's not entirely true. I feel like this is part of that victim narrative. She has no sex drive. It's all my work. I'm all alone here.
Hmm.
So I would question the truthfulness of it. And when he's in that framing of she has no sex drive, I think it justifies his aloneness and that she's broken and he's not.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. What you said reminds me of a husband turned to his wife once, said, "Tell me your sexual fantasies." And this is not something they discuss a lot, right? And so
Hmm.
she gets all her courage and she goes on to describe something that they already do. Like it's like their last encounter. And he's like, "No,
Hmm.
no, 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 no. Tell me your fantasies." So she says, "Okay." And then she goes on to describe something else that they've done recently. It's like, "Ah, no, tell me your fantasies." In other words, he was expecting her to say something that he had in mind, right? He was fishing for
Hmm.
something rather than recognizing that for her, what her desires or her true desires are going to be different than his. And he needed to give enough room to accept that this person had different style, different turn ons than he did. Is that kind of what you're
Right.
talking about here?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that there a lot of times someone will say, well, you don't have this, and they're saying, I mean, you're not a planner, or you're not organized, or you don't do this, or and it's just that it's not presenting in the same way that they experience it, and so they're dismissing it. This happens a lot with spontaneous and responsive desire.
Mm-hmm.
Spontaneous desire is more present, and responsive, takes the setting and the context, and so there's definitely sex drive there. It just doesn't present in the same way.
That's right. Just because it doesn't fit the Hollywood mold doesn't mean
Mhm.
there's no
Mhm.
sex drive.
Right. And it's very rare for someone to have absolutely zero sex drive.
Mhm. So maybe absolutely no sex drive might be extreme, but let's
Mhm.
take it on face value here. What if she really has diminished desire for sex?
Yeah,
Where,
very possible.
how would we help John and Julie out here?
Well, I think we're going to get to that a little bit more, but I would be very curious if this messaging is going towards her. I often meet with wives who are looking at their husband's desire, or again, with a lower desire, looking at the higher desire, and they're like, yeah, maybe I don't because it doesn't look like that. And because, or like your story, my fantasies are different. So maybe they don't qualify as fantasies. And so when you dismiss or diminish or don't give credit for what's there, it does tend to get less, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So where the focus is what's going to grow. And if the focus is on you don't look like me, you don't act like me, you don't have the same desires as me, then that is going to diminish what desire is there.
Good. John goes on to say, "I do all the crap the experts," and he puts experts in quotes, "I do all the crap the experts say to do to make it easier for her to want to fool around. I think these are just part of being in a marriage. Clean, help with the kids, give her time with her friends, cook, etc."
So I think it's half of this right, and the other half, you're like, oh, John. So yes, it is part of just life to help with the kids and give time for each other. They are just part of marriage. But there is some part here, I think, at least calling it crap. And also that this should make it easier shows some earning going on, right? Like I'm doing this and I should be getting this and I'm not. I'm doing this. The experts say if I do this, she'll do this for me. Again, that focus is outwardly on her. And I'm sure that she feels, we don't have her voice here, but I'm sure she's feeling the pressure of that. Like, look what a good job I did on the dishes so that you could be free to give me sex. Or
Yeah.
didn't I do a great job putting the kids to bed so you could give me sex? Like that type of pressure doesn't really encourage desire. It's in that transactional earning frame, it's not really conducive to building desire.
No, because you set your marriage up in a hierarchy in a way when you
Yeah.
feel owed for something.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that was the way my marriage was for a long time too.
Mm.
I know chore play is the new foreplay, and I
Yeah.
could go, overboard on doing the extra things because
Mm-hmm.
I really had an ulterior motive, right? It was to earn
Right.
her favor, to earn sex, get her to see things my way or whatever. And it's antithetical to intimacy when you really
It
want
is.
it's not how you build an intimate relationship. It's how you build obligation. It's how you
How you
build
build
like
obligation,
you owe
duty,
me. Yeah.
entitlement.
Yep. Entitlement.
Yes.
That's a great way to do that. And if that's the
Mhm.
way you want to run your marriage and feel like you're owed sex, that's a great way to do it. But that's not the kind of marriage I believe is best. You want an intimate relationship for that.
Even calling it crap
Yes.
shows either frustration behind it that I'm not getting what I want, or that he doesn't feel that it's worthwhile to put his effort or energy in those directions. So there's even in sort of just the messaging, doesn't indicate a lot of generosity or willingness. Like there's other things going on there.
And to a degree, I don't blame him because you'll, like, I don't know, listen to a podcast and they'll say women are really much more turned on when their husbands help out more around the house. Because that's true, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
truth behind that.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
Well, there's truth in the partnership of it.
yes, exactly. But you get so focused on looking for the magic pill and you forget that two different people can do the exact same action, but the motive
Mm-hmm.
behind it, the heart behind it, can be entirely different. And
Absolutely.
so it's not the action that you're doing, it's the heart behind the action that communicates far more of what's going on in the relationship.
Right. And the message that I'm getting from these words is that he's very frustrated, victimized, feeling like he's earned it. And that is going to lessen desire. And it's not really attractive.
Mm-mm. No, it's not.
So it's
Right.
it's not a very magnetic energy to bring to those types of things.
So we've
Yeah.
talked about what not to do. Let's just take 1 minute and say an example of what to do instead. What would it look like on the other side?
I think if you choose to partner with your spouse, which I'm a huge fan of,
Uh-huh.
that partnering is willingly and generously given.
Yes.
And that generosity fuels the attraction and the magnetism and desire. But it may not be immediately. It may be eventually. Or,
Right.
right, you're building a pattern, you're building a friendship, you're building a partnership over time. It's not a direct if then. If I do the dishes, then I'll get sex, right?
Right.
It's like, can we build this friendship and partnership and create a way to support each other and be there for each other? Yeah. Okay. That will fuel the connection and the intimacy and also the honesty of being able to share when you are just exhausted or how you can create more time or what's working or what's not working. Yeah. So it's not a it's not a magic pill, but it does create the space for connection and intimacy.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I'm sure we'll talk more on that as we keep going. So,
Okay.
all right. Then he says, we resorted to, quote, scheduled sex about a year and a half ago when our youngest started all day school. She has Fridays off, and I make sure, if at all possible, I'm home on Friday afternoons so that there are no interruptions and we don't have to be quiet or rushed. That works most of the time unless there's something else more pressing.
I think there's great things about this. And the great thing is that they found a time that works for both of them when they don't have to be quiet or rushed. And the thing about that's again shows the narrative and the framing that he's coming from it is we resorted to schedule sex as if it's somehow less than or not good enough instead of like, oh my gosh, we found this amazing time and we can have all the time in the world to not be interrupted and have great sex.
Uh huh.
And instead it's sort of got like a negative tinge on it. And scheduling doesn't work for everyone, but often in our busy modern lives, it's actually really wonderful. So, like, it's something that normally would be like, yay, you found this wonderful time away from the kids and away from work. And this is so amazing. And yet he's not presenting it that way. We resorted to this, and the scheduled is in quotations, meaning it's less than or somehow not as valuable.
Right. Maybe I'm reading into this too. It's not so much the scheduled part that he feels bad about. It's that I really sense there's sex done out of a sense of obligation, or it's because it's on the schedule we'll do it. But if it wasn't on the schedule, it wouldn't be something she would choose. So
Hmm.
he feels like she's doing it because they agreed to do it and it's a Friday afternoon, so we're going to do it. He doesn't feel chosen in it.
Right, right. And that again may be just from the framing of sex should be my way and you need to choose me and it needs to look like this and you have no sex drive.
Yeah, right. And it could be that she has lower desire. She's not enthusiastic about sex. And she's saying, okay, I guess we can have it then. And he's going through the motions with her, but it feels hollow and empty.
Hmm.
Partially because he set it up to be that. It's
Right,
not
right.
about it's not about passion. It's not about closeness.
Or
It's not about
replenishing,
yeah, right.
cherishing. Hmm.
Generosity, right.
Hmm.
It's not about that. It's about orgasm or whatever.
Right, right. It
When am I
seems
going to
that
have
that
my turn? Uh-huh.
right, that seems to sort of be the measure here.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Right. He goes on to say, other times the kids aren't home and we could, but she won't. They're asleep. She won't unless she wants to. She will initiate, but only sometimes. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, the she won't, she won't, she won't. All of the focus is going outside of him to her.
Uh-huh.
And that external focus, it's much easier to look outside of yourself and to blame or to judge or to criticize rather than look inward and say, what part am I playing in this pattern and how am I showing up and what kind of thoughts, emotions, energy am I bringing to this situation and setting? And it's much easier to look out and just judge and say, she's not, she won't, she's not, she won't, instead of be curious and wonder, well, why? What is her experience like? And what's going on between you? And is this sex worth wanting?
Right. Yeah. What are
Is
you
this
offering?
cherishing?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, what are you offering? And so, I mean, even when it's in this, he says she will initiate, but only sometimes. Like there's no credit or everything that she does is not enough,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
is the feeling that I get from him.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if she
Even
were
when
to.
effort's made, it's like, well, she initiates, but not enough, but only sometimes.
Yeah. Or not in the way I like, or
Not the way I like. Yes.
yeah, it's
So that to me indicates this is more of some type of anxiety for him than true sexuality, because true sexuality is very generous and is very replenishing and is very refueling and nourishing to the
mm-hmm.
relationship, to both parties involved. And often we have anxiety parading as sexuality, and that anxiety can never get enough. It's always like, are you choosing me? Are you telling me enough? Do you want me? Do you want me? Do you want me? Is it yet? Time? Is it now? Is it now? Is it now? And so when it's anxiety, it doesn't have that replenishing feel, and you can never get enough, and it feels very much insufficient
Mm-hmm.
and like you're looking for every reason why. Like you'll have some couples that are coaches, the higher desire partner would say, if she would or if they would only do this, and then the spouse does that and it still doesn't feel replenishing. And again, because it wasn't actually their sexuality leading that, it was their anxiety.
Yes, yes, yes. Some men that I coach say, I just want my wife to desire me. And I think
Hmm.
we all want that. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that idea. But their focus then is on, where's her button? Where's the knob that I can dial up of what? Where's a secret thing inside her that I can just turn up, and then all of a sudden she will desire me more. And so they look to their spouse and as if they're the problem to solve.
Hmm.
But
And I think that also allows them not to step all the way in and choose first.
yeah,
I'm going to desire her and choose her and cherish her, be a partner with her
uh-huh,
that's not trying to track. And again, it's safer to say, well, I'll really desire and choose her when she chooses me, or vice versa, right? We're talking about it in
right,
John
right.
and
And you're
Juliet from
back.
either side.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So the better question isn't how can I get her to desire me more? It's how can I become more desirable?
Yes.
Which is a completely way of thinking about the problem. Because
Or
it
am
puts,
I actually choosing her?
yeah, am I really choosing her?
Or
Am
am
I
I just
really
trying to get
invested?
something from her?
Yes, exactly.
Hmm.
Another metaphor that helped me understand that was if you want to catch a bird, you can try to chase the bird. That's probably not going to work very well. Or you can just build a better birdhouse. It's the idea of can I be invested in this person? So why wouldn't they want to be with me? Like
Hmm.
because this is all good meanings here.
Hmm. And the chasing, the pressuring, the pursuing, it is very repelling.
Hmm.
It is not conducive to intimacy. It doesn't feel generous. The person on the lower desire part, in this case, Julie, would often feel taken from or less than, or that they only want sex because, my body. It's not really about choosing me and cherishing me. And so these meaning frames can really be alive. And of course, they don't want to choose that.
Right, right. Of course. All right. I'll just quickly read through the rest of this paragraph and get your thoughts,
Okay.
Amy, and then we'll get to the new thought he has below. As a general rule, we are looking at 2 to 4 times a month. She won't take the lavish gummies I got her. So he's listing off things she won't do. She won't take the lavish gummies I got her. I guess that's like a gummy that's supposed to help you with your libido. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She won't get her hormones checked, which is also a very common thing that people go to, right? It's probably your hormones. Because on Hollywood, the women don't have a problem with desire, but you do. So it's got to be your hormones. I say that jokingly. She won't.
Yes,
She
yes.
won't do any of it. So she won't take the gummies. She won't get her hormones checked. She won't do any of it and tells me I need to learn self-control because apparently I'm alone in how high of a sex drive I have. I don't know what to do anymore. The sex is great when it happens, but after years of study and podcasts and books and experts, I'm no better than 20 years ago.
So I think he actually didn't mean to do this, but he actually nailed himself, meaning that all of the study and the podcast and books and experts seem to be directed towards her.
Mm-hmm.
And he is no better because he hasn't really looked at himself and what
Uh-huh.
part he might be playing. All of his energy and effort and vision is towards her because she's obviously the problem. And if she would just take the gummies, get her hormones contract, whatever, then everything would be fine. But I can guarantee you there's more going on than that. And I
So,
can guarantee there's some pressuring and some control and some messaging around you're broken and I'm not.
yeah,
And if
yeah,
you would just be like me, we would be fine.
yeah. So why do we tend to look to the other person to try to solve them instead of trying to fix ourselves first?
It's much safer and easier. It's far less discomforting. It's far more difficult to look at yourself and see the pressure, see the anxiety, see the insecurity, see where you're not choosing, see why you're not choosing, to see what may not be desirable about the way that you're behaving. It's far easier to look outward and to judge than it is to look inward and take a good view at yourself.
Yeah, I think that's why Jesus teaches that on the Sermon on the Mount about having the plank or
The
the beam
most.
in your eye and the
Mm-hmm,
speck or the mote in the other person's eye.
mm-hmm.
Like it's far easier for us to see faults in other people than to take on ourselves.
So true. And it indicates really control. He's really trying to solve her and control her.
Uh-huh.
I didn't see one thing in there where he said anything about himself,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
anything that he's learned about himself or understands about himself or understands about how he might be approaching his sexuality or what it even means to be sexual. All of it is very focused externally on her.
Yeah. Amy, have you ever tried to solve a problem that was outside your control to fully solve?
We recently sold our home, and I really wanted to make somebody buy my house. And I really wanted it to happen a lot sooner than it did. I had no control over that. And the more time or energy I spent thinking about trying to make somebody buy this or it happen sooner, the more just frustrated and discouraged I would have felt.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And
Because I have
let's
no control. Mm.
pretend for a moment you're on the
Yeah.
buyer's side and you have a very anxious seller.
Mm-hmm.
It sometimes is a turnoff, isn't it? Like
Oh, absolutely.
you can tell they're desperate and it's like, there must be
Why do they
something.
want to sell this so bad? Something must be wrong with this house.
Yeah, yeah. Now, of course, that's just a house sale example, but take it into an
Mm-hmm.
intimate context. If I'm trying to solve a problem that's outside of my control, it drives my anxiety way up because
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to solve something I can't solve, right? My anxiety goes
Right.
up. I'm trying to solve you. And then from the other person's perspective, it's perceived as what?
That you are trying to get them to say you're enough or you're okay, and it's very pressuring. It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah,
You're trying to make them feel a certain way that you actually don't have the power to make them feel, and so it feels very trapping.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I can't do that for you, and yet you keep asking me to, and you keep asking more intently, but I'm not actually able to do that.
So we've talked about what not to do. Let's talk about what
Hmm.
to do instead. And the answer is probably going to be, sign up for coaching.
Yes.
Hear me? Just a plug in for us. But really, like this is the work, right? This is why coaching is helpful. But that aside,
Hmm.
what do we do instead?
So coaching is, yes,
Uh-huh.
amen, wonderful for
Uh-huh.
me and for others. And I
Right.
mean, I use coaching too. I think
Right.
it's just so
Mhm. I
powerful.
have a coach for me
Um,
too. Uh-huh.
yes, yeah, I think everybody needs a coach.
Yep. If you want to win, get a coach. Mhm.
That's right. That's right. So much of, like you did, the moat and the beam, so much of what's going on when you're looking outwards, you don't have any vision of what is going inside of you. A lot of times when anxiety is presenting as sexuality, we take a chance to go look at, well, what is going on there, and what are you afraid to face? What are you afraid to see in yourself? What are you afraid to know? And you'll often find all different kinds of insecurities or past experiences or things that have led these clients to wonder and worry about their worth, or something, you know,
Mhm.
of a deeper matter, maybe something related to their family of origin or something that happened earlier in their marriage or something that happened in their career. Anyways, that bring up these questions, and they're trying to get that solved through their spouse. And so instead, we turn that focus and then direction within them, and we start solving and working through those issues. Then, when they show up in their marriage, they're not pressuring or trying to get that from their spouse. They are showing up in choosing, in honesty, and in true sexuality, which is very generous.
Mhm.
I think that's one of the main things that helps me determine if someone is showing up in true sexuality is the generosity of it.
Mhm.
If they are tracking and controlling and manipulating and pressuring and needing more, it's usually a really strong indicator they're claiming their anxiety as their sexuality.
Great. Good, good.
So
All right, Amy. John goes on to say, I've tried understanding body image issues, or pain, or hormonal changes, or being tired, or overtouched. I've tried leaving the issues alone and hiding my resentment. I've tried
never a good idea.
No, you got
Let's
to
just
address
stop
it.
right there. So, if there is resentment present, resentment needs to be addressed immediately. And resentment is a sign that you are giving someone else responsibility for something that's yours. So, again, there's another indicator that, anxiety, insecurity, choosing, something like that is going on for John, and he's given truly responsibility for it.
Yeah, yeah. Good, good.
You can't hide resentment. It's always present. I
Yes.
mean, if you're feeling it, it's underlying and it's there.
Mhm. And you can tell. Yep.
You can tell, you can feel it. It's, yeah. It's again that feeling that's driving an action or a motive that's driving an action. So even if the actions are the same, if resentment is driving it, it has a very different outcome and feel.
Yeah. And a note about resentment. If you have resentment in your relationship today, resentment is a symptom of something deeper. And it's
Hmm.
important to address it because if you don't, it'll eat away at the foundation of your marriage and it'll crumble. So,
Yes.
like,
It was one thing I had found in my resentment, and it was really that I didn't have enough of a voice.
mhm,
I had enough of a voice. I wasn't
speaking up.
stepping into my voice. Yes.
Mm.
And so you'll find resentment present in lower derived spouses in that they feel like they can't speak up or they get dismissed or that what they're saying isn't recognized as truth. You'll find it in higher desire spouses when they're trying to get their spouse to solve this anxiety.
Yeah, yeah, great. And another couple I coached this morning, different than John and Julie here. He's the higher desire spouse, she's the lower desire spouse, but he's been rejected so many times when he'd initiate that he doesn't initiate anymore. And she'll initiate out of obligation. Oh, it's been, 3 days. He needs this. So she'll
Mm-hmm.
initiate, and he resents her the whole time. So
Mm-hmm.
that happens because
Mm-hmm.
he's given up, his responsibility. He's like, and all that. It's not good.
It's still so much joy out of intimacy and the marriage, partnership, and friendship. It really does.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, John goes on to say, I've tried bringing it up both inside and outside the bedroom. She used to tell me I need to control myself because my high sex drive is something of an anomaly. And I just want to stop right there. And I don't think it's a curse to have a high sex drive. I don't think it's a curse to have a low sex drive. Having a sex drive can actually be a blessing if you harness that energy to be generous, like what you're saying, Amy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if it drives you to more closeness, if it drives you to more honesty and more humility and all those other wonderful virtues that go into building a good marriage, a sex drive can be the force that pushes you into those things if you let it be that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think this is an example of how couples get polarized.
Uh huh.
So he's saying she has no sex drive, and she's saying your sex drive is an anomaly. So each one is pointing at the other one saying, no, you're broken. No, you're broken. No, you're broken.
Uh
When
huh.
really both of them are co creating the broken pattern. Neither one is broken.
Mm hmm.
There just isn't room for both yet. And they haven't figured out how to honestly create that space where both of them can thrive. So
Right.
they're pointing fingers at each other.
And she's probably wishing if only he had no sex drive, we wouldn't have this problem. And he's
Right.
probably
Then
wondering, yeah,
we wouldn't have to talk about this all the time and it wouldn't constantly be coming up
uh
and
huh.
he'd stop pressuring me. We could just enjoy each other and let things happen as they happen.
Uh huh.
Yeah.
And this next line I think is very common. It doesn't mean it's good, but I think it's really common what we tend to do when we have frustrations in a relationship. Okay, John says that she says she hits up a few of her friends and she would tell the truth, and none of their husbands have a high sex drive. They do, however, admit that they are the higher desire spouse, meaning these other wives that Julie is talking to, that the wives are the ones with the higher desire and they wish their husbands would engage more. And I think John is thinking at this moment, like, come on, Julie, don't you know how good you have it here? You have a husband that wants to engage with you, where all your other girlfriends are complaining that their husbands aren't as engaged. Like, wake
Mm-hmm.
up, you have it so good here.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes on to say, I've never understood low desire, how a guy could ever turn his wife down, or how you could be too tired or busy for sex, both from the feeling standpoint and from the intimacy standpoint. This is something that only she and you do together, and it feels so good. Why wouldn't you want to do it all the time?
So I have a lot of higher desire people ask a very similar question to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a little bit of a trap in it. Yes, it is something that the two of you can only do together. But then, though, why don't they want it? Some people can feel trapped by that. Like, I can only get this from them. So they have to, like, come meet me where I am. And again, use that for that external. I'm not broken. They're broken. This is so good. Why don't they want it more? It's not really creating the space for both of them and that collaboration and partnership to work together. It is something that hopefully only you and your spouse do together.
Uh-huh.
And it is something that feels good. And it is something that is so replenishing if it isn't done from anxiety, pressuring, trying to get a certain feeling. And if it is done from the place of anxiety, it doesn't feel as replenishing and it becomes more of like a buffer. Like you need it all the time to be okay instead of allowing it to be the blessing and, the amazing replenishment and refresh the eros energy that it is, right? Instead of
Uh-huh.
helping
Uh-huh.
you feel alive, it just it doesn't fully create that aliveness because it's again behind it is really the anxiety alive instead of the generous sexuality.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. So let's end on a high note, Amy. I think
Yes, yes.
if you're willing to be a little open and vulnerable here, I am too. Like, because in many respects, I've been in the same place John's been. I
Mhm.
remember like being frustrated with my wife because
Mhm.
we had, mismatched sex drives. I'd buy
Mhm.
her, the latest sex book that I had read,
Mhm.
dog-eared and highlighted with margins in the,
Yes.
notes in the margins saying, read this, pay
Do
attention to
this,
this
be this.
paragraph, circle line.
Right. Did
You
you
need to,
notice this?
right?
Yes.
Hello, wake up. Like, you got to be doing this, right?
Yes. Yes.
And
We
then,
used to listen to podcasts and only point out what it said about the other person, but never about ourselves.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
So I want to hear your story because you're beyond that now. If I
Mhm.
just what I know about you, you and Greg just have
Yeah.
this genuine relationship. Not saying you don't have
Mhm.
your bad days too, because you're human. Like I have my bad days too. But for me,
Mhm.
so I'll tell you what happened to me, and I want to hear what shifted for you. So
Okay.
John, the biggest change in my marriage happened when I could look at my wife and appreciate her just for the goodness of who she is deep down inside. I changed my perception. I no longer looked at her as a broken person. Rather, I looked at her as a goddess, like an amazing person, and how fortunate I am to be with her. It's kind of like akin to having an energy of gratitude for me. And, and once I could really feel that deep down and fundamentally, it's like getting new sets of contact lenses on my eye. The lens at which I saw my wife completely changed. And my anxiety went way down. I'm no longer trying to solve something that I can't solve. I'm not trying to fix her. And I just focused on everything I could do to be a better, more generous husband. And that was the biggest shift that happened to me. It's kind of a selfish focus when you think about it. It's like, because I'm now focused on me instead of her or us. But it's not selfish because it's more about becoming more self reliant. I wasn't relying on her so much to tell me I'm good enough or making sex the gauge of how good a relationship is. It was more like, am I doing my best at just loving this amazing person in my life and just appreciating what is?
I love that. It's such a beautiful journey. Our journey involved discovering my husband's porn use, which we then tried to work through, and we did it in all of the wrong ways.
Uh huh. Uh huh.
With me saying, "See, maybe similar to Julia, see, your desire's too high. You just need to figure out how to not do this and not have such a hard desire."
Mm-hmm.
Me having anxiety over sexuality, and if it was even good, and kind of that purity culture was something that I had to work through and open myself up to. I think both of us worked on a lot of honesty, really being honest with each other, like every day. That opened up the capacity to let go of the anxieties. And each of us focused on our own way and our own sexuality. I really learned about the meaning of eros and eroticism and the energies of aliveness and what was really being communicated in our intimate interactions. And he really had a lot of anxiety about actually the goodness of his sexuality. And as he faced that and recognized, yes, it is really good, that brought him out of places, the false places of sexuality, into the honest and true one. And I think in small little ways to really large ways, seeing his comments or reaches or kisses as really that bid to connect instead of when I was in the other framing, it was like, oh, he's going to take from me. Oh, this means I'm obligated to have sex with him. Oh, this means I have to, oh, it's time again. Really changing those meanings, crucial for me, and seeing like he's inviting me. He's the higher desire, I'm the lower in general. We're more closely matched now, but he seeing those as an invitation into that connection and intimacy. And that intimacy really is how we cherish each other. And it isn't just in sex, it's throughout every day, all day long. It's weaving in and out of all of the daily things we're doing into our intimacy too. Like it's not just a sex act, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, I love
Um,
that.
so I run out of words to describe how connecting, meaningful, cherishing, powerful, like it is to be with each other now. And just like I feel so privileged to just have him as my friend and lover and partner. And I just cherish that so much. And he feels the same. So, yeah, there were a lot of, it was quite a journey for us, but I think it is for most people. And I don't think there's any shame in that. I used to think when I first found out about his pornography that it was the worst thing that ever happened to us. But I
Hmm.
actually think it was the best because it really opened us up. And
It put you in a situation where you both had to be more honest with each other.
yeah, yeah.
Because up
And we
until
were
then, it was easy to
hiding.
hide.
Yeah, hiding and masking and not fully honest. And it really exposed us in ways that I don't know that we would ever have made it through this journey. Like we wouldn't have pushed ourselves towards it maybe on our own. So I'm really actually grateful for it. And yeah, it's hard to describe how amazing it is to just share life with him.
Well, very good. Amy, this has been a fantastic discussion. Will you please leave us with one black belt sex tip? And it really isn't about sex per se, but it's about the 5-minute emotions check in. You alluded to it a little earlier. Will you
Mm,
please teach our audience what that is? Because I think
yes.
this is really black belt, and I hope everyone's listening to this.
Yes. So my husband and I do a daily check-in. I think really every marriage, it's healthy to have some type of daily check-in. And the daily check-in that goes beyond, did you pick up, Sally and oh this is bill is due and oh did you notice the toilet's leaking, right?
It's not just
Beyond
logistics. Uh huh.
it's not
Right.
just the logistics of life, but a check in that is about seeing and knowing the emotional experience that each person is having. So we do an emotional daily check in. We do ours at night, but you can do it anytime throughout the day. Some couples prefer to do after dinner, some do it in the morning. So at night, what happens is one person is the listener and one person is a speaker. And the speaker takes 5 to 7 minutes to share what their emotional experience was that day. Wherein were they happy and sad and proud and discouraged, grateful? What was
Frustrated.
frustrating?
Uh huh.
Yeah, frustrating. What did they enjoy? What brought them, love or happiness, or where did they succeed? And the listener just listens. They don't say anything, they don't interrupt. We like to hold hands or look at each other's eyes, but you don't have to do that. We like to cuddle a lot while we're doing it. And then when you're done, you swap roles, and the speaker then becomes a listener, and the listener becomes the speaker. And it gives you an opportunity to see into each other's lives and hearts and experience beyond just the surface level. It gives you an opportunity to be really honest. There have been many days when, something hurtful has happened even between us, and it can be shared there. And often couples don't have a space to share. There's too much defensiveness or interrupting or different things that they don't really listen to each other. So this little daily emotion sharing allows us to really see and know each other's heart. It allows us to bring our honest selves. We talk about things that we did that maybe we're ashamed of, or were an old pattern, or something that we regret. We also talk about our highs and the things that went really well. We talk about what's hard between us. And with the just listening and just speaking, it creates the capacity to listen instead of bringing in all of your different defense mechanisms. And I find when you really listen to one another and you bring that honesty, create so much intimacy.
That's such a beautiful practice. I hope everyone listened to that and tries it out. It's fantastic. Emily and I have been doing that ever since you taught us that too. And it's more intuitive for us now to kind of go there. But it's a good practice to talk and connect, but on an emotional level like that.
Yeah, it's really powerful.
All right. John and Julie, thank you for being courageous and allowing us to share your email and the bits of your marriage here on the air. And Amy, thank you for your expertise in sharing your mind here. If you'd like any coaching for yourself in anything like this, really, this is the magic of coaching. It helps you see your mind. It helps you see things that you're probably blind to. We all have our own blind spots, and this is why I believe this is so helpful. And coaching is there to help you win. You can learn more about it in our programs on our website, and this is where you can also interact with Amy on a weekly basis.
Yes, come join. Super fun. Love Next Level. Love Get Your Marriage On. Come join us.
Great. All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in accelerating growth in your marriage, either sexually, emotionally, or spiritually, I want to invite you to work with me in my affordable coaching program called Next Level. More information about Next Level and my fun and sexy apps for couples are available at getyourmarriageon.com. Please also don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And be sure to tell your married friends. I promise, they will thank you for life. Now go get your marriage on.